Okay, we are here, we are back, and we will have the speech from Fabio Buttussi from the University of Udine. The group is the Human Computer Interaction Lab, and the speech is about a serious game and virtual reality in education and human computer interaction perspective. Please. Thank you.
So thank you for the introduction and for organizing this workshop. The workshop is a good idea, particularly because it brings together people from different disciplines. And my thought here will try to add the perspective from human-computer interaction. First of all, maybe some of you is not familiar with the term. Human-computer interaction is a discipline that studies how to design technological systems to make them usable by humans, but not simply usable, to make it usable in a simple way, in an intuitive way, in an effective way, in a reliable way, and also safe and, last but not least, a pleasant way. I will try to apply this concept to the topic of education with VR and serious game. As you can guess from the definition, ACI as the part which relates technological systems. So it involves researchers in computer science like me, but also people studying ergonomics, electronics, and so on. At the same time, human-computer interaction studies the humans and the interactions between the humans and the machines. So it involves people who is expert on humans, so psychologists, neuroscientists, sociologists, and so on. And then, here again, last but not absolutely not least, when a human-computer interaction researcher studies a real application, then it must involve the expert in the particular domain. Okay, so when we talk about serious games for particular application, then we have to involve people who is expert in that topic. Okay, that was a general definition on human-computer interaction. I work in the computer interaction lab of the University of Udine, and this lab was created by Professor Luca Chittaro in the late 90s, so we have a relatively long experience in human-computer interaction. And in particular, since the beginning, we were interested in two main topics. One is virtual reality and one is mobile devices. This is a screen from some virtual reality projects at the Human-Computer Interaction Lab at the beginning of 2000. And as you can see from the figures, the graphics was the graphics that you can have in 2000, and also the hardware was of such period. In particular, if you pay attention at the figure below, you have these huge VR headsets with a very, very narrow field of view, so people also only see a small part of the 3D scene. They are not so comfortable to wear, and so on. Nevertheless, we start to explore how we can use this technology in different domains. One of the examples is a visit of the city of Udine reconstructed in 3D. And the other one is maybe more interesting for you as a community working on education, because it was a sort of training system to assemble and make maintenance on a particular equipment. More than 20 years passed, and now virtual reality is completely different. We have a wide new range of tools, ranging from this very simple cardboard where you pick your smartphone and you put in there, to new VR headsets that feature a very wide field of view, so people is more immersed in the 3D scene, and 6 degrees of freedom of tracking of the head. So people can move the head around and also move the body in space. And this this data is used to update their position and orientation inside the virtual environment. This here is the hardware we can use for immersive virtual reality. Immersive virtual reality is the one that makes the user feel surrounded by the virtual environment. Okay, one of the last figures is a recent also haptic glove that also adds to the to the visual and the auditory part, also the tactile part. On the other hand, today we can have non-immersive virtual reality to display virtual environments on a standard screen, such as the screen of a computer, maybe inside the browser, or display it on a tablet, or even on your smartphone. In this way, we can reach a huge number, very huge number of possible users, and so it's interesting to work on both immersive and non-immersive virtual reality, also for our educational applications. Working together, so working at the intersection of VR and mobile devices, we build on this our expertise in serious game. We started the research in serious game in 2007, and at that time, the more or less number of yearly publications about something similar to serious game was about 40. 10 years later, we have about 200 or more than 200 publications about serious game. And now most of, besides specific conferences and journals, several higher ranked journals in different disciplines regularly publish articles about serious games. So the idea of using games for serious purposes is increasingly attracting the interest of researchers, and as you know, in different disciplines, as this workshop testifies. Just a quick example. For example, psychologists are interested in motivation dynamics. So we have topics like as motivation is extrinsic or intrinsic. So with something that is outside the narrative of the game, or with something that is inside the narrative of the game. And we can speak about mechanisms that can be endogenous or exogenous, considering the relation between the game and the learning aid. And pedagogists and educators may be interested in applying learning theories, such as behaviorism or constructivism, so games, leading to different kinds of approaches to serious gaming, okay? With games that rely on conditioning and reinforcement from one end, or maybe they rely on free exploration on the other end, okay? But going back to the serious game, you may have noticed that I have not yet defined the word serious game, okay? And this was intended because serious game definition is something that comes after several iterations and going through several stages. I have no time to go through all the stages in this presentation, but I just want to briefly show some names of the phases that we went through. And so even before the idea of video game, dating back to the 50s, people would like to use games, for example, board games, pen and pencil games, for educational purposes. And then video games happen to the scene, and we have games that are intended to change the behaviors of at least the attitude of people, for example, toward the topic. There is a game called World Without Oil that tries to motivate people in dealing with oil shortage. The game is not from today, but the problem is still very actual. And another great number of games that in some way are included into serious game are games for elite. So I would like to use games for very different topics, going from the treatment, the rehabilitation, or for training the nurses and the doctors, and so on. some of these games work on the psychological component, so work as the games for change to induce people in adopting, for example, an healthier behavior, and other instead are focused on gaining knowledge and gaining skill, and maybe are more of interest for educators. One interesting subset of games for health is the one called exercise games, because bring together physical exercise with game. And in half of the 2000, let's say 2008 or near, there was an increasing attention toward these topics, both from the academy and from the industry, with interesting new products coming into the market. Another category of serious games is the one called advert games, which uses the games for advertisement purposes. Now, in some way, this has been replaced because the main point of strength of advert games was that people had the game for free, but now people can have a lot of games for free, for example, on the mobile phone. So in some way, the advert game community had to change the way to make advertisement in some games. And then we have edutainment. I know that in the pedagogy and education community, edutainment is still a word that is used, but instead in other communities it has a sort of let's say bad feeling. Okay, edutainment had a great idea. And the great idea of bringing together education and entertainment. So the name was perfect when it was chosen. The problem is that when it was developed as an idea, it had a very, very strong educational component. So from that point of view, it was okay, but it did not support well the engagement, the curiosity, the exploration. And so being often associated with, let's say, dated graphics, simplistic game mechanics, had a sort of led to a sort of bad feeling. I have one example for all. I don't know if you ever tried PC Genius. It was sold at newsstands in Italy, but I mean, years, let's say 15 years ago, I mean, okay? And it had the great idea of being an edutainment product. And when it started, at least for me, it was great because bring a lot of games to learn, let's say, maths, English. So it started very well. But then the graphics was very poor with respect of commercial games. And also the training was crazy because the system continued to say, you are a genius, you are excellent. We know from education literature that saying too often that people are too good is not good. But from an engagement point of view, it was even worse because people start to lose the challenge in the game. If every action was a genius action, then there was no challenge in the game at all. So I bought 2 numbers of that and then I give up. So this is just an example to say that edutainment probably also because it strongly relied on extrinsic motivation. So saying you that you are good, giving you points or prizes and so on, but not working on intrinsic motivation. The game per se was not an engaging game. Okay, so edutainment is somehow, let's say, failed in achieving its goal of supporting education and training of people using the educational games. One thing that must be said is that at the time it was also very difficult to make a game. Okay, so people have to do a lot of design, but also graphic and also technical work. The situation is now much more different I will describe in the following. So educators and researchers try to react to the failure of edutainment by using something that was by design engaging and attracting players, the target of education strategy. And so they started to use commercial off-the-shelf games. So teachers started to use SimCity, Civilization, Sims, even games that you may feel like a bit unsuited for teaching, such as Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Okay, people go around and kill people, so it's not so educative from that point of view. But thanks to their great reconstruction and very close to reality reconstruction of the ancient Greek, that can still try to be used in an educational context. The point there is that with commercial off-the-shelf games, the huge task is on teachers. So the game itself is good to attract and engage players, but without teacher support, the game was not effective to teach something. So people can, let's say, play, but then learn nothing. And now it's the place where serious game, the idea of a serious game comes. The idea, serious game would like to combine the pros of commercial off-the-shelf games in terms of higher engagement, exploration, and so on, but also the strong educational component that we have with edutainment. Okay, so we try to put together the pros of the two worlds. And serious games share the desire for having an intrinsic motivation that we can find in commercial off-the-shelf games, but also with the strong player agency, and the players can actually actively use the game to learn something, and learning should become part of the game experience. They should not be separated, but the two things should be integrated one another. Okay. The problem, as I told you, with edutainment let's say, edutainment was constrained by the limited resources of the time. Now the things change, and now we can develop serious game using, let's say, game engine, using already ready 3D assets. So we don't have to do all such work. We can use existing tools and go straight to the creation, to the design and the development of a serious game. So now my favorite definition of a serious game, I borrowed the definition from Zaida that published it in 2005 on the IEEE flagship magazine called Computer. And Zaida defines serious game as a mental contest played with a computer in accordance with specific rules that uses entertainment to further government, corporate, training, health, and so on, communication objectives, okay? And Zaida also had a very, very interesting picture inside its paper, and the picture shows that a game brings together competencies from a design team who makes a story, from an art team that makes the graphics, from a programming team that develops the software. And if we want to have a serious game, we must have also the pedagogical part, okay? So we have to have the experts in training, in teaching something, okay? This is my favorite definition for this reason, because it clearly indicates that a lot of different people should work together, and this is one of the things on which ACI is based. Just a minor note, since we are talking about definitions, when we speak about serious game, we speak about a product, okay? A final, a whole game, okay? Something that you can use to play, okay? And that can be used in different non-entertainment settings, okay? When we speak about gamification, which is another word that is popularly used in the recent years, we speak instead about the process, okay? So we borrow some game mechanisms from games, but we use them in non-entertainment settings, but we are not developing a game. We are just borrowing something from games and apply it to another domain. So serious game simulator represents something to support learning in a virtual environment, and gamification is instead built on top of real life. Okay, so we change something that happens in the real life. Okay, so as serious games researchers, we are interested in several things. The Professor Baptista this morning already said that a huge effort is spent on showing that serious games are effective to teach. So we have to evaluate the effectiveness of game, and a lot of the research has been spent to check if serious games are, for example, a viable alternative to traditional teaching, and if the learning outcomes are more or less the same. But there is much more than teaching effectiveness to serious game evaluation, and in particular, we have to pay a lot of attention of other elements of the learning experience. Okay, so for example, we have a lot of studies showing that serious games maybe are not more effective than other methods, okay? But they may have an advantage because they offer better motivation, they allow for better retention of the content, or better transfer of what you learn in the real domain. So as a general message, I would like to say that we have to study serious game from a sort of holistic approach to consider the whole learning experience, and not only in particular the outcome in terms of learning, which of course is the most important, but not the only one. This is, in this slide, I would like to summarize the ACI perspective on serious game. Human-computer interaction researchers are involved in serious game design, in serious game development, and in serious game evaluation. In the design phase, we have to involve the domain expert and also the target users. This is a very important thing because some serious games fail because the main concept was not tested with the real users. So maybe we are believing that we are making a very nice game, okay? But the game simply does not work because we never tried the concept with the actual target users of the serious game. Okay? So in this case, if you, let's say, work with children, you have to include some children. If you work with, let's say, professional in some particular domains, you have to involve the professionals in that domains and so on. For the development phase, this morning, some colleagues already speak about using virtual reality, metaverse, the artificial intelligence techniques, and these things all contribute together with a lot of things in computer graphics and so on in the development phase of the game. And finally, here again, last but not least, the evaluation phase. We have to involve especially the target users in the evaluation of our serious games, and we can involve them in the lab for some controlled studies, but we should also involve them in the real context of use. This morning, we were speaking about what after the end of the project. Let's say I have a nice project. I make a very nice game, okay? I test it with the target users in a very small lab. We are all happy with our 100 users, okay, as you told in previous presentation. But then what happens when people is supposed to use a serious game in the real context? So it's important also this last aspect. We would like to evaluate the serious game in the real context of use with the real users. So after this long introduction, I would like to provide you with some examples from our experience in the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. As I told you, I started working on serious games, and in particular on fitness games in 2005, 2006. The publication is from 2007. We are not talking about virtual reality. In this case, it's 2D game, but I would like to just show you a short video to give an example of the early years of our research. And in that case, if the video cooperates, okay. You should see the video also at home, right? Okay, I go to the main part. In this case, we consider two very traditional games. They are entertaining because they entertain generation of users, let's say Breakout or similar, okay? But we make the users control that game using physical movements. So our user, this is an example, have to jump left and right to move the bar of the Breakout and catch the ball and progress in the game. The idea here was to connect the difficulty of the game and dynamically adapt the difficulty of the game using heart rate of the user. So when a user's heart rate is low, the game becomes more difficult, and so the user has to jump left and right very quickly, like me during presentations. And when instead the user is exerted, the games become easier, and so the ball is lower, and so the user has to make easier activity, let's say activity that requires less effort. Okay? So this is just an example from the fitness game era. Here is another game, very simple graphic as well, and but the nice thing was that people have to do bend the knees to control the position of the ship and destroy the other ships. Okay. The other example is of some years later, and we moved from a desktop platform to a mobile platform. At the time, smartphones were not available, and we use a sort of let's say grandfather of smartphones. It was a PDI equipped with phone functions, but the nice thing was that it has an integrated GPS, while previous models have an external GPS system. And in that case, again with the 2D graphics, we had people running around, and here again the difficulty of the game was based on the heart rate of the user. So the user has to walk on a football trail, but he or she has to walk in the real world, like in the figure. And if the user jogs below the optimal intensity, some gold appears on the path, and the user has only a few seconds to pick up the gold, so he or she has to speed up. And instead, when the user is overexerted, we have to prevent overexertion of the users. So in that case, to invite the user to slow down, we put a monster on the trail, and the user has to slow down to allow the monster to disappear because reaching that position. As you can see, the graphics for that time it was nice. Now it looks a bit dated, of course, more than 10 years ago, and we can do a lot of other things with also other hardware. Okay, but some ideas were already there. So we would like to make a game that is engaging itself and has the side effect of teaching you something. In particular, in this case, would like to train the user to perform a physical exercise at the right intensity. Okay. So we progress in the year, and well, not so much. Okay. We have to go back. Okay, something bad happened to the slides, but we will try to fix it. Okay. After the first period with fitness game, I moved to a project in which the goal was to train nurses and doctors in advanced life support procedures. And we did it with a serious game that ran on a standard computer monitor and a standard PC. In that case, we had different scenarios, and we dynamically adapt some tasks in the scenario by considering the disabilities, the special needs, let's say, of the patient to rescue. And the idea here is that the users can interact with the non-player characters in the scene, perform some medical tests, and then try to guess the pathology of the virtual patient and administer the right treatment to eventually save him or her. Here again, the graphic was the graphic of 2010 or more or less, but the tool was effective anyway. And in this case, we bring a first contribution in not considering only training effectiveness, but also the retention of knowledge, okay? Which is a topic which is increasingly attracting the attention of researchers in these years. In particular, we administer a pre-test, then we administer the game, then we administer a post-test, and then we tested the game months later to check how knowledge changed. And as expected, we have to note that the knowledge decreases. We know that the problem of losing knowledge with the passing of time is a huge problem, but still the users retain part of the knowledge, so their knowledge months later was still greater than before using the tool. In some way, this suggests that continuously using the tool, we may counteract the effect of the knowledge and skill decay. Well, indeed, this part was focused on knowledge alone. I jumped to 2020 for another study, where instead we assessed also the effectiveness of a virtual reality serious game to teach also the skills, not only the knowledge. I can show you a video because the nice part of this experiment is that besides having the virtual reality, so besides immersing the user in the virtual environment using the headset, we also have the active part by integrating the virtual environment with the real environment. So people perform a cardiac message on a mannequin, and the mannequin was synchronized with the virtual reality. Okay, so we put the sensors, we put trackers on the mannequin and on the ends of the users to check if the integration of the active feedback can play a role in teaching. And the nice part that came out from the study is that both integrating and non-integrating the mannequin, it's okay if we talk about knowledge. So people can learn which are the steps of the resuscitation procedures, also using virtual reality alone. Let's say performing the cardiac message on the air, okay? But the retained skills are very different. So in a final assessment, without the virtual reality support on the mannequin, people trained also with the haptic feedback perform the compressions better in terms of depth, in terms of correctness of the release, and so on. I check the time. How many minutes I have?
7 minutes.
Okay, so I can skip some things. We continue the medical part also with serious game about massive disasters. Okay, so massive emergencies where a lot of people are injured in the same time, and also some colleagues work also on terror attack preparedness. I will show you this because it has a nice 2015 nice reconstruction of the train station of Udine. If you were in Udine in 2015, you will more or less see what you see now, well, unless what happens now, so the part with the disaster, luckily. And this, I skip to the interesting part. So when that happens, okay, you see it done with a bit delay, and then the user has to do the actions to escape from the station after the attack. I talk you about this because it is very interesting to start to understand the role of interactivity in such a context. The Professor Kittero and another, at the time, I think, PhD student, compared the same simulation with a passive role of the user or an active role of the user. So half the users played the game, and the other half simply watched a video of what happened during the terror attack. And this is one of the results that I told you at the beginning. From a learning point of view, passively watching the video was as effective as actively playing the game. Okay, so from the effectiveness in terms of preparedness knowledge, they were more or less the same, but the psychological effects were different in the two conditions. People who actively played the game felt more vulnerable to terror attacks and felt more the severity of the consequences of these attacks. And vulnerability and severities are two important ingredients inside the protection motivation theory. I don't know if you are familiar with protection motivation theory. Okay. Are very important to then activate, to stimulate the user to learn how to cope with the risk. Okay. Because if people felt that can be involved and that the damage can be severe, they are more motivated to develop strategies to cope with this. So this example is important to say that we are not only interested in the effectiveness, but also on other elements. I skip a few examples to go to the project that on which I work for more years. I work on this project supported by Federal Aviation Administration for more than 4 years. And the goal of US Federal Aviation Administration was to find new media, and in particular serious games, to stimulate aircraft passengers to learn about safety procedures. The problem is that people do not understand the pictorials of safety cards, or do not pay attention to the safety card and safety briefings at all. Okay, so we have to find alternative strategies and to teach very different things, from assuming the correct place position to knowing what to do with luggage, to being able to open the emergency doors, and so on. The idea here was that we had to explore different alternatives, not just one serious game, but a variety of strategies to teach the safety procedures. And I go to the main part. We work in different directions. The first was creating an emergency water landing simulation using at the time, the Oculus Rift. Maybe you have seen the movie with Tom Hanks that landed on a river with an airplane. Okay, we did this simulation before the movie was out, and we simulate such a landing in virtual reality. And the idea is that we simulate it from the point of view of a passenger that had to perform all the actions to survive the water landing. Okay, and the idea with I skipped the last part. This idea was gain interesting popularity on the media with Discovery Channel and so on, talking about the simulation, but also attracted considerable attention in the academic community. It is currently my most cited paper, I think. And in this paper, we compare this immersive serious game with traditional education method, in this case, the safety card, showing the same pictorials of the corresponding actions that happen in the game. And here we showed that if we give users the serious game or the safety cards, at the end of the training, both methods are effective to gain knowledge about the emergency procedure. But 1 week after, people who learn using the safety cards forget part of the knowledge, while people that use the serious game retain the knowledge learned using the game itself. So in this case, we measure knowledge 3 times, before, after, and 1 week after, and we show this difference between the immersive serious game and the traditional method. We continue this kind of research, and we focus on what happens if we do not change the game, but we change the hardware. Okay, so the next step was to have another scenario. In this case, the so-called runway overrun, when the plane does not stop before the end of the road, and then the plane crashes outside the road. And in this case, the game was the same, but we compared 3 conditions. One on a standard desktop monitor, one using an old model of VR headset with narrow field of view and only rotation tracking, but not position tracking. And the same game again, using a more recent VR headset, which has a wide field of view and also tracking of position and head rotation. And we saw that from the effectiveness point of view, all the 3 ways to deliver the serious game was effective, both in terms of immediate effect, the post-test compared to the pre-test, and also considering 2-week retention. Okay, but in this case, we noticed that engagement and presence in the virtual environment were different. Okay, so we can say that all the 3 methods to deliver the serious game are okay to provide knowledge, but we must pay attention to the fact that one method, so the one using the more recent VRL set, is more effective to engage users and to make them more present in the virtual environment, in this case, in the simulation. I skip a few slides on specific applications, but you can find them on the store. This one is to learn the brace position, seeing the consequences of not assuming the correct position, like in this case. And in this case, we tested also the locus of control that people develop about this kind of experience. This app here is a mobile app to learn how to wear a life vest. And in this particular case, the nice stuff was that we integrated also the leaderboards to stimulate the social competition between players in the world. And then I jumped to this in this paper published to the Journal of Human Computer Studies. We studied instead a 2D game using arcade elements. So this morning we speak about genres. In that specific case, instead of having a simulation, like in the previous cases, we had a sort of game in which you control this one cartoon avatar, and you have to go out the plane, but people is doing funny things. So we have fun, we have a very time schedule, and so on. And we saw that also this approach can be useful for teaching something and motivating users. And the nice thing of this paper is that we did 2 studies, one in the lab and one having users playing at home for 1 week, how much they want, okay? So in the natural context of use. More or less, finally, all this work led to the development of Prepare for Impact. Prepare for Impact is an app that brings to mobile devices the 2 simulation scenarios tried in virtual reality I speak about before, and other 4 additional scenarios and the scenario generation mode and so on. And the app is available for Google Play and the App Store, and has been downloaded by more than 10 million users. And some years ago, when we had about 3.5 million users, we make a study on this so-called big data. And we did 2 kinds of analysis that have been published this year in this paper on the IEEE transaction of visualization and computer graphics. In particular, we asked volunteer users to make a pre-test and a post-test after playing 4 levels, and removing all the users who do not complete the levels or opt out for the test and so on, or make the test skipping the answer, going very quickly to the answer, but focusing on the users that did the test 2 times in reasonable times. We have about 45,000 users. I think that is one of the biggest samples for a serious game evaluation. And with these 45,000 users, we showed that playing the 4 levels of the first 4 levels of the serious game brings an increase in people knowledge about safety procedures. But we also did another kind of test. We said, okay, this is the subset of users that opt in for filling out a test, okay? But we would like that games are a tool usable by itself as an assessment tool, okay? Even without forcing people to fill knowledge tests. And so we analyzed the performances of users who played the same game at least 2 times. Those who played 2 times, those who played 3 times. And we saw that the game actually teaches the safety procedures because people improve in terms of number of errors and so on. And in that case, we have up to 400,000 users in the sample. So we find very significant effects from the statistical point of view. Some of them are also big in terms of effect size. Okay, one word about this last application. As I told you, the project asked us to try different approaches. Okay, so we had the simulation, we have the arcade game, we had the mini games with specific topics, but we also work on a more, let's say, classical approach, having two virtual trainers teaching all the procedures in extreme detail. These are called also APAS. Let's say it is animated pedagogical agent. It is something that brings together the intelligent tutoring systems you heard about this morning and the embodied agents in the computer science literature. And also in this case, we had some evaluation. And in this particular case, we started to test specific features. For example, what happens if the safety, the virtual safety assistants use humor, use fear appeals in teaching? And what happens if we provide the same lesson on a mobile phone or using immersive virtual reality? You can find more in these two last papers. One thing, one conclusive note on this, in the last paper here, we found that we again achieve similar results in terms of knowledge gain with the mobile version and with the immersive version, and that both are better than the traditional method, these safety cards, to learn about the procedure. But the things on which we found difference is the engagement. And in particular, the immersive VR version is more engaging than the mobile version. Somehow, the immersive experience is, let's say, engaging by itself, while the mobile version is seen as something less engaging unless we do something to compensate for it. And in particular, in the app that it's actually available on the store with about 1.5 million users now, we have introduced, in this case, some gamification features. So we give some rewards when people correctly do the procedure with the safety coaches. And also we added games, and we added a sort of long-term gratification in terms of coins that can be converted to planes and decoration and so on, to compensate the motivational part. So we introduce some motivation to stimulate people use the safety coach. Well, that's all. I end with this bibliography slide. For those who are interested in human-computer interaction, there is a nice book in Italian indeed, but you can find other tests on the same topic also in English. And I would like to suggest this book, Understanding Video Games. It's not a computer science textbook because it talks about game from a more sociological point of view, but I think it's very important to understand very well video game culture to develop well the serious game. The last reference is for those who actually would like to make serious games. it is a sort of introduction to programming using a popular game engine. For other information about our lab, you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook. You can add to our YouTube channel to see the videos, and most importantly, you can find the preprints of the publication where you find the results of the studies. Thank you.
Very much for this great presentation. Very, very inspiring. I must confess that I will use your link to the video for my class because I need the videos to explain the serious game and the difference with gamification. So in some of your examples are very brilliant. I would ask if there are any questions from the audience. Yeah. Yeah. Please. And then we will do the hour.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's not really a question, it's just a curiosity. I just wanted to know if the cardiopulmonar video serious game, which is the name, because in a research I found one serious game that's very similar.
That one about the resuscitation topic is not available to the public.
Oh, okay.
It is not a name, I think. Now okay.
I found something really similar in a research, so I would like to it was the same.
There is an app from IRC, that is Italian Resuscitation Council, and I know that there are some apps available. Let's say our is not distributed yet because it requires the mannequin, and not all the people
of course
have a mannequin. But we are thinking about this aspect. So with the working team, we are thinking if it is the case to translate the app for the mobile platform and having it distributed. But let's say, I think that in this particular case, our contribution is in the haptic integration. So maybe if you remove the haptic integration to make an app for the phone, it becomes similar to other apps that you can already found on the store.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, I know probably regarding. Okay, thank you. There are no questions from the public, but I have a lot of questions. But some of them will be for our free time after the conference. But I want to ask something that can be useful for our audience. You, in part in your speech, focused the attention on this. How is important the reality of a serious game? It's just important to have a good storytelling, to be immersed to embed in a situation, or you have to feel really to be there.
This is a very interesting question, and I think that we will need to carry out research for at least another 10 years to give a full answer. Let's say that for sure, game mechanisms are playing an important role in terms of engagement, and that's why there is no more Professor Buttussi there, but that's why I was very interested in his work about experiencing, let's say, at least testing different gems for different kinds of skills. And this is the key point, to find the right game mechanism, the right game approach for the different skills you have to teach. And the other question about presence is another interesting question, because somehow there are studies that link presence in a space with memory, and memory, especially memory of negative events, is somehow linked with let's say, presence is linked with experience, and emotional experience, and emotional experience, especially the negative one, is linked to memory. So we may notice that the more you are immersed, the more you are emotionally involved, and the more you keep in the memory the concepts. This may be one of the reasons why the immersive serious game was better than the safety cards in our 2015 paper after 1 week. So immediately after you learn, but 1 week after you retain better with the immersive solution. We have not enough data to bring a general conclusion about this. So I think that, as I told you, the next steps of research is working more, and we pay a lot of attention on presence. So in those studies where I told you, okay, the learning effect was comparable, let's say, but we have a difference in terms of engagement and presence that may be important in terms of long-term retention. And we have to investigate more about it.